Chilly.
A little cold outside. About to get colder.
Yes, it is.
And of course, for all of you people who are keeping up with all of the politics and all of the media and all of the Twitterverse and the president and the former president and all that, you see, I lost my faith in media about 10 years ago. We had an ice storm coming through here in Houston, and it apparently happened in lots of cities around the southern and southeast.
Was it that long ago? Was it more like 6 or 7 years ago? Because I remember
they had the reporter out on the street with a bucket of water explaining what happens when water gets below 32 degrees and what that means, what it means to freeze. And this poor son of a bitch is standing on a street corner as the temperature's dropping, waiting for a bucket of water to freeze because the media is just that shitty. So I stopped watching the news. Like I catch my news in those little aggregators. That's right. Like, this is the top news of the day. This is what happened. This is what happened from the conservative side. This is what happened from the liberal side. And moving on. And if it's more interesting to look into, then I'll look in more deeper. Otherwise, I'm just like, well, yep, president playing golf, whatever. Like, screw it. So,
what they really love during these times is black ice. Black ice is a huge thing for reporters in Houston whenever there's going to be an ice storm. They love some black ice, too. They go searching for it on the highways, and they throw stuff across it to make it all dramatic about just how bad that black ice. But I remember 6 or 7 years ago, things were shut down for like 3 or 4 days. Like freeways were shut because I remember they opened up the only freeway that you could really get around was the Beltway. So they took away tolls for 3 days so people could get around town. Everything else was frozen.
That was 7 years ago.
Yeah, it was something like that
in February because I was in Vegas on a work trip. And Autumn, my daughter, was she was a baby. She was born in November. So she was only a couple months old. And I had to go to Vegas for a week. And while I was in Vegas, they're like, ice storm coming through. And so everybody's freaking out. And like, I remember my dad even called. He's like, well, it's freezing in Houston. What are you going to do? I'm like, well, dude, I'm at work. Like, I'm here until they let me go. And then I'll figure it out. And then I got here. And, of course, there's gravel on the roads. And there's flashing lights everywhere. And it took me for what normally takes me about half an hour, took me about 2.5 hours to drive home.
Yeah.
Because I was redirected in every different way.
Yeah, the city shuts down with some ice. So that's the only thing that I don't want to have to deal with next week is because people are panicking. They're writing on Facebook, what should I do with my pipes? There are people that are actually planning on draining even their hot water heaters.
Yeah.
It's people go into panic mode big time.
So those of you who are not from here, we freak out when it gets cold. But then whenever it's like 85 degrees up north and y'all start dying from heat exhaustion, we laugh because 85 degrees is it's a brisk sort of day down here. So anyway, for those of you who are new to the show, because we are now Legion, and that is the subject of the show, is we're glad to be part of the podcast network that is Legion. And so this is our episode 171, and it's not exactly our inaugural episode for Legion because we were there last week was whenever we finally got on the network, thanks to Mr. Bo Ranzel. But for those of you who are new, because you follow the Legion podcasts, we are going to introduce ourselves.
And for other people that are new to the podcast also on the other platforms.
Exactly. So it is Wednesday, February 17th, 2021, and it's cold outside, and we are Legion. So without further ado...
First, the old business.
Okay, and introducing Old Business. Old Business is this day in horror history, or this day in history if it's just interesting, maybe, something's going on. So, on this date, we've got a lot of birthdays to celebrate. February 17th is a great day for horror, so we're just going to go in order. But in 1923, Jun Fukuda, who was the director of Godzilla vs. the Sea Monster, Son of Godzilla, and Godzilla vs. Gigan. So, if you are into Godzilla, the upcoming Godzilla vs. King Kong, who you betting on?
I'm Godzilla. I'm Team Godzilla all the way, just from being a youth. To me, Godzilla was just the better of the two. Yeah, I enjoyed his movies a lot more. So,
all right, 1925, and we just lost him recently. Mr. Hal Holbrook from The Fog and Creep Show. He's the one that delivered a bullet to Adrienne Barbeau in one of the best imaginary scenes in the movie history. And also fed her to Fluffy. All right, 1936, Cleveland Browns Hall of Famer Mr. Jim Brown was born. He was in The Running Man, and he was also in Mars Attacks, walking around punching Martians in the face.
And I grew up watching him in a whole lot of blaxploitation films back in the
yeah.
day too. He was great.
1954, happy birthday to Renee Russo. She was in Outbreak, was her horror claim to fame, which is strangely and pretty prophetic. I mean, COVID wasn't as deadly as the Outbreak, but
it's still relative to current times.
Yeah. 1954. We've been talking a lot about this guy on the What's Awesome podcast, but happy birthday to Don Coscarelli, who wrote and directed all four of the first four Phantasm films. He also directed The Beastmaster and Bubba Hotep. So,
some great movies there, man.
Yes. You can spend a day watching Coscarelli movies.
It's
pretty rad.
And not get bored.
All right, 1962, Lou Diamond Phillips. He was in The First Power. He was in a couple other horror movies. He's most well known for playing Richie Valens in the La Bamba. And also, he was in Young Guns and Young Guns 2. 1965, because this guy just kills everything he touches. Happy birthday to Michael Bay.
But I've got to admit, it was nice seeing live action Transformers when it did come out. That was very exciting. The first one for sure. Just
True.
It was...
All right, 1965, happy birthday to the Creeper, Mr. Jonathan Breck, from Jeepers Creepers 1 and 2.
Yeah. And 3.
And 3.
Don't forget about that one. People want to forget about it, but it was there.
1970, happy birthday to Mr. Dominic Purcell from Blade Trinity. 1971, Denise Richards. Her claim to horror fame is being married to Charlie Sheen. But she was also in was it I Know You Know What You Did Last Summer or something like that.
One of them, yeah. One of those.
1974, Jerry O'Connell from Stand By Me.
Yes, and many other things.
He's
cool. I like him.
Who would have known that Vern was going to be the biggest of the
Yeah, he's going to be one of them with the longest career.
You know? 1980, Jason Ritter, son of John Ritter, who was in Jason vs. Freddy. Mm-hmm. 1981, and I can't believe I'm saying this name on the show, but she deserves a credit because she was in House of Wax, but happy birthday to Paris Hilton.
Yes. You know, I actually never watched that remake, but I picked it up the other day at a thrift store, so I'm going to give it a go. And the young lady that checked me out said it's her favorite horror movie, which she either has horrible taste or I've slept on this movie for too long. I don't know which one it is.
We'll see. In 1981, happy birthday to Joseph Gordon-Levitt. He was in Halloween H2O and The Dark Knight. Mm-hmm. And my favorite, Third Rock from the Sun. Third Rock. All right. We lost on this date in 1968, and Donald Wolfel, who was from Blood the Vampire and some of those other 1970s strange horror movies, or 50s and 60s horror movies. Sorry, my bad. 1990, Mark Clement, who was in Poison Ivy and King Kong Lives. 2003, Peter Shrum, who was in Terminator 2 and Demonic Toys.
Uh-huh. They're great. I love Demonic Toys, man.
And Dan O'Harely from Halloween 3.
Yes.
We lost on this date in 2005. And movies, the only one that's really of note is House on Haunted Hill, the original from 1959. But that is it for the old business. We're going to take a break, and we will come back with the news.
I shot him 6 times. I shot him in the heart. Man, he's not human.
Universal Pictures presents Halloween 2. More of the Night He Came Home.
Who is it?
There was nothing within him, neither conscience nor reason, that wasn't even remotely human. This is some kind of a joke. I've been trick-or-treated to death tonight. You don't know what death is.
Janet, go tell Mr. Garrett we're having trouble with the phones.
There is no place to hide. He will always find you.
What's this? It's a Celtic word. It means the Lord of the Dead.
Mr. Garrett?
Halloween 2. More of the Night He Came Home.
And here we are again.
Yep.
Mr. Gomez.
New business is new business, and this is new business.
Okay, for those that are new to the program, of course, this segment is new business, where I come in and talk about current topics. Some horror related, some pop culture related, and some just funny shit that we come up with. So, hope you guys enjoy it and stick around after this. Okay, first off, all goes out to Mr. Larry Flynt, who died at the age of 78. Larry Flynt was not only a porn guy, but he was also a huge First Amendment advocate that did a lot in the championing of First Amendment rights. But a lot of people know him from the portrayal by Woody Harrelson in the movie People vs. Larry Flynt, which is a great film. If you've never seen it, go check it out, and you will learn a lot about Mr. Larry Flynt. He had been in declining health for a while. He died at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. He had been paralyzed back in 1986 in an assassination attempt on his life. The guy was a fighter, and he was a visionary when it came to the porn industry for sure. He did a whole lot in that regard. So if you don't know a lot about Larry Flynt, go and definitely check him out. He's an interesting story, to say the least.
I like how you use the words porn and visionary in the same sentence.
Well, it's a think about it. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry that it's changed and grown tremendously over the years. And he was one of the people that kind of made it more acceptable. Not just what's his name from Playboy, Hugh Hefner, but Larry Flynt. He was definitely close to that level of Hugh Hefner when it comes to making it mainstream.
Hustler showed you the axe wound.
Why is that girl wounded, Mom? Okay. Next up, where is the story that I'm looking for now? Okay, did you see that HBO Max is coming out with a Scooby-Doo spin-off directly involving Velma Dinkley in her basically it's going to go into Velma's background and everything, and how she grew up, which I find very interesting. Velma, the speckled smarty pants from Scooby-Doo, is getting on a spin-off series on HBO Max. The character will be voiced by Mindy Kaling. The show has been greenlit for 10 episodes and is being described as an animated series for adults.
I have mixed feelings on this one. I've said many, many times on this show and in others that Scooby-Doo is pretty much where I got
it's a gateway for horror.
And got into horror. And, you know, it's like you had Scooby-Doo from the late 60s into the 70s, and then it's been rebooted and redone and extended many times. And it seems like every time they do it, it becomes more and more cynical, more self-referential, and it just kind of seems to poke fun of itself in kind of an unkind way. And so, like, my daughter got onto Scooby-Doo, and she was watching, like, the most recent series, and it was, like, it was crappy, because it was, like, the girls were just, like, boy crazy. Like, Velma and Daphne were just, like, fawning over the guys, and the guys just couldn't care less, and it was just the same episode over and over again, and it was just crappy. So I don't necessarily have high hopes if that's the same direction they're going in. Like, I'll give it a shot, but mixed feelings too. Not only was Velma our gateway into horror, but Velma was our gateway into, like, tying chicks up too.
Yeah.
So, you know, if they have some of that stuff in there, that might be interesting.
Okay, next up, we've actually spoken about this woman on the podcast more than once, and we knew where she was just by talking to our friend Amir Katik, who has met her a few times in his work at the Edwards Movie Theater, but Shelley Duvall has popped up again for an exclusive interview with The Hollywood Reporter, which you can find online. And I'm going to post this up to the Scary Dad's Haunted Forum, which is our Facebook page for all you out there if you want to check it out. It's a great, great article. I highly recommend everybody check it out. Shelley Duvall, since she left LA, she's kind of been hiding out in the hill country of Texas. And she did pop up, I think it was in 2016 maybe, on the Dr. Phil show in a absolute horrendous episode of that garbage television where he made her just look like a psychotic, and he got ripped apart for even bringing her on that show in the state that she's currently in. Shelley Duvall, as many of you may know, she's mentally, she's not in the best state of mind, and hasn't been for a long time. But she's been out in the hill country. There's a beautiful picture of her smiling. She apparently she's enjoying life. In the article, the reporter actually meets her for breakfast at a small hill country restaurant. And the people there love Shelley Duvall. They actually at one point tell the reporter, "We take care of the people we like around here, and we love this woman. And be careful with her. Don't make this article look stupid." But he goes through her life and times. Just it's a great, great article. And like I said, look for it on the Hollywood Reporter if you haven't seen it yet. The locals, they look at Duvall more of an eccentric aunt than a faded movie star. She's just a regular person out there that they love to death. But it's great for some insight as far as where she's been, how she's been feeling. It's pretty neat. And we've talked before about how it would be so great to meet Shelley Duvall because of her iconic role, of course, in The Shining, as Wendy Torrance.
Popeye.
Her
that was one of the
Popeye.
first movies I saw in the theater. I mean, I was a little kid, but I remember that octopus scene like it
Oh,
was,
yeah.
Yeah.
And she goes into a little bit about Robin Williams and just so many things. But definitely check out this article. It goes through her life, the people that she's dated in her past. It's pretty cool. It's good to see that she seems to be doing well where she's at. And they don't give the actual city where she's living in, of course, because they don't want people bothering her. But yeah, so check that out on the Hollywood Reporter. Shelley Duvall is popping up and surfacing once again. And next up, we've got a Will Greenlee.
Nice.
And for those that don't know, there's a reporter out there in Florida for the TC Palm that he does some serious articles nowadays, but he was very well known for his off the beat column for the TC Palm, which off the beat are just some wacky stories that he'd find. It's not hard in Florida to find wacky stories. So, but what Will Greenlee does is he gives a little twist to his stories where he offers you information that you absolutely have no need for throughout the articles, just random facts and lessons that he gives you. So let's get into this latest Will Greenlee. The headline reads, "Man destroys toilet in bathroom brouhaha." Okay. Martin County, Florida. A man accused of destroying a toilet at the Coconut Bar was giving a notice to appear in court in connection with the alleged commode carnage. Where am I at?
Uh-oh. Blue screen.
No, not yet. The case of the purported potty pulverizer began at 1:49 a.m. January 19th as a Martin County Sheriff's deputy went to the Coconut, the 4700 block of Southeast Dixie Highway. Emergency officials were called because a customer was breaking the toilet, the report states. The customer, later identified as 25-year-old Newport Richie man whose occupation was listed as plumbing. He'd been playing billiards tournament, but got cut off from alcohol, the bartender told investigators. After being cut off, he left the Coconut, but returned during last call and tried to buy a beer, an alcoholic beverage involving the brewing and fermentation of cereals, typically malted barley and flavored by means of hops. He goes Greenlee a couple of times in this article. It's not just one. He really gives us a good show in this one. The man was asked to leave but refused. He said he wanted to use the restroom first. An unidentified person followed him to the restroom to ensure he uses it and leaves immediately. The man was accused of getting upset and removing the toilet lid and beating the toilet with it. So that's the equivalent of ripping off a man's arm and beating him with it. He got pretty mad at the toilet. And just in case you were wondering what a toilet was, Will Greenlee is going to educate you. Typically installed in bathrooms, a toilet is a receptacle into which a person defecates and or urinates, or in some cases they actually get drunk and throw up in. It consists of a large bowl affixed to apparatus designed to flush away the urine and or fecal matter into a septic tank or sewer system. The toilet was destroyed and the man ran out. Investigators reported finding the man who denied knowing about the toilet. He eventually fessed up to busting the toilet, referred to colloquially as a porcelain throne. He was issued a notice to appear in court on criminal mischief charge. So that is your introduction to Mr. Will Greenlee. He does pop up every once in a while on the program, and we love a good Will Greenlee. He's been able to define to us the history of the anchor tattoo and Popeye and so many things that we already knew about. But it's always good to hear them in Will Greenlee speak. So that's what I have today for new business.
Awesome. We'll take a break. We'll come back to the meat of the show.
Station 31. You read me? Found something in the ice. We need some help down here. Can anybody hear me? We found something. We found something. We found something.
12 men have just discovered something. For 100,000 years, it was buried in the snow and ice. Now it has found a place to live. Inside. Where no one can see it, or hear it, or feel it.
I know I'm human. Some of you are still human. This thing doesn't want to show itself. It wants to hide inside an imitation. It'll fight if it has to, but it's vulnerable out in the open. If it takes us over, then it has no more enemies. Nobody left to kill it. And then it's won.
You guys gonna listen to Gary? He can beat one of those things!
All right. So who are we? Who is Scary Dad, and what are we about, and what do we do? So way back in the day, I guess around 2012, I wanted to start a Halloween blog talking about how to make homemade props and do yard haunt type stuff. And the internet being what it was, there wasn't a whole lot out there well, I didn't even want to start a blog. I wanted to find one and discuss. I mean, there wasn't much out there, so I started one and started reaching out. And then I had 2 kids, or I had a second kid, and kind of mothballed it. And then a couple of years later, met Scott, and then we started talking about it, turned it into a podcast, and then it's just kind of developed from there. So, kind of where we come from, what's our history, what's our. We've already talked about Scooby-Doo, so that for me was a big one. Every day when I was a little kid, wake up from a nap, Scooby-Doo was on, and I'd watch them explore old haunted houses and, get chased by ghosts and monsters, and it was great. So then got a little bit older, got into some of those gateway horror films, the good ones like Jaws 3 and Poltergeist, and stuff that I was probably too young to be watching, but everybody was watching it because in the 80s parents just didn't care. We actually had jungle gyms and our playgrounds weren't padded, and movies like The Beastmaster were rated PG, but had, glowing earworms and witches and
sorcery,
lots and lots of boobs in them. So there's, we kind of got messed up by the whole 80s horror, non-horror. Everything in the 80s had a horror element to it, even if it wasn't a horror movie. Right. So
they utilized a lot of tropes back then throughout.
Yeah. So even if you look at Disney in the late 70s, early 80s, they were doing stuff like The Black Hole and the Black Cauldron and stuff like that. It was good and scary. So that's where I kind of come from. Scott, yourself?
Yeah, well, as I've talked about before, my love of horror is interesting because it was pretty much, it started off similar to yours as far as, seeing the spooky stuff on TV as far as Scooby-Doo and stuff at a real young age. And then my dad passed away when I was 9. My mom was a single mom working, so me and my cousin Mark spent a shitload of time at the video store running VHS tapes on the weekends. And my mom had told the people at the VHS store, he can rent R-rated movies, that's fine, I don't mind. So I kind of had a car to pick up whatever I wanted whenever I rode my bike there. And just developed a love for these 80s cheesy horror movies that I would rent again and again and again. And we'd pick out our movies because the VHS box looked cool. And just that just kind of spawned my love for horror. I enjoyed it so much. Watched a lot of movies that I shouldn't have been watching at that age, but I was a well-grounded kid. I knew it was just movies. I didn't have nightmares after most of them. A couple of them gave me the creeps. First time seeing Friday the 13th, that gave me nightmares. That kind of had me spooked a little bit. But just growing up, that's what gave me my fascination for movies. And what's interesting is now, at the age I'm at now, because of this love I have for these 80s, slasher movies, it has given me a huge appreciation for independent film. Because now it seems as though the ones that are staying true to that old method and formula for those 80s movies are the independent films that are coming out now. So you'll find out that the podcast we're huge proponents of indie film. We work with the Houston Horror Film Festival, of course, as you'll hear about also. I judge movies for the Texas Frightmare Film Festival. We love horror. Now, one thing I also want to let you guys know is we are not a movie podcast. We do talk about horror movies every once in a while that we love and that are coming out and different horror movie themes, but we're not the typical horror podcast, and that's not our primary goal. We talk about all things horror. We talk about things pop culture. Billy and I are also big comic book nerds, and some of the primary comic book artist that really got me into comic books was Bernie Wrightson with the Swamp Thing series. Growing up in South Louisiana, which you'll hear about a lot too, because South Louisiana is a huge influence on me because that's where I grew up. You'll hear lots of stories from there. Swamp Thing was the one that kind of hit home because it was based in Louisiana in the bayous where I grew up. So I got huge love for Bernie Wrightson, the greatest horror artist, ever. But I also enjoy stuff like Preacher. I enjoy, growing up, The Incredible Hulk and Batman were my two big ones. And I think I still have such a love for Batman because it's, once the theme, The Dark Knight came out, it kind of took a darker turn. And there's tons of just kind of dark horror tropes that are involved with the Batman series. So you'll hear us talk about that kind of stuff. It's definitely... Our podcast can't be really pigeonholed into one type of horror podcast.
Well, yeah, and when we do movies, typically, and we haven't done it in a while, we need to get back to it, but we actually have a feature that we've done quite a bit called Fresh Eyes. Fresh Eyes, the rules of the game are we take something that is... It's a well-known horror classic that everybody's seen, that we've seen so much that we pretty much just know it back and forth. And the idea is to put it on, play it from credit to credit, and then forget everything you know about the movie and pretend like you're watching it in the theater for the first time. So imagine you're watching Jaws for the first time that shark emerges from the water whenever he's coming at the rowing coach. And you see that huge sideways torpedo of a shark with its mouth open. Like, what would that have done to you in a theater in 1975? What's that sort? Like the first time you see The Fly, and you're like, it's so just nasty and gory and visceral. And we were watching. I was watching that when I was 11 years old, and it was like we were talking about. It was going, oh, he puked on the guy. Oh, so gross. But whenever you watch it as it's meant to be seen in the theater, like we can't watch it in the theater, but we watch it as if we were in the theater, and then we come back, and it really did open up a whole lot of perspective on a lot of stuff that we were just like, wow, it's like watching it for the first time. And like, I've never noticed this thing before. And so, yeah, we need to get back to Fresh Eyes because that was a real fun feature that we do every now and then. We're also big music nerds, heavy metal. I mean, I come up in the age, my dad was a DJ, so I had a whole album collection of classic rock from the 50s, 60s, and 70s that was just kind of at my disposal. So, and my dad was in bands in Houston, and he knew folks, like he knew people like Billy Gibbons, and then when he was a DJ, he met lots of people in bands, and so he'd met like Jefferson Airplane and those guys. And so he had a whole bunch of really kick-ass stories of, hanging out with these guys and drinking beer after shows and, driving them around in his little VW bug, stuff like that. So I've always been big music, and, it's like, you're going to laugh when I say this, but like kind of around that mid 1985, 86, 87, we did an entire show on 1987, the movies and music, and that year I would have been 11 years old, 11 turning 12, and so you're Predator and RoboCop, but at the same time you have like Def Leppard's Hysteria's coming out, Guns N' Roses' Appetite for Destruction, stuff like that, where kind of the rock and roll world just really woke up. It had been a lot of yacht rock and a whole lot of overproduced studio, quote unquote, like pop metal. Things like Guns N' Roses woke us up to the underground things, that LA heavy metal like Metallica and, British heavy metal like Iron Maiden and stuff like that. So there's a serious satanic panic throwback element to our, because I was there, dude. I was right in the middle of it.
Like I told you, Geraldo came to my hometown.
Yeah, Geraldo came to Scottstown. I mean, we had, lectures in I went to a private school, so we had lectures in church and in school about the dangers of things like Motley Crue and Skeletor and everything in between. It's like everything we touched was just oozing with evil, like in Time Bandits. Like, don't touch it, it's evil. And of course, like any good red-blooded American, I reached right in there and touched that mofo. And so now here I am all these years later doing a horror podcast and writing books about human sacrifice and stuff. So Yeah, it's pretty rad. We have a good time here.
Oh yeah, and our music tastes definitely vary. I was similar growing up. I remember stories from my mom. Back when she was growing up in Louisiana during the days of segregation. When some of the prominent black artists would travel through, they would play in these little hole-in-the-wall clubs in these small Creole towns and everything. And she used to tell me stories of seeing James Brown come through and seeing him at the club, an Ike and Tina Turner review. And she was huge into Zydeco music, which she would have me in the Zydeco clubs when I was 11, 12 years old till 2 o'clock in the morning. And it gave me a huge appreciation for live music. And that's one of the things that really helped with my love of music, is just seeing these bands live, learning about them, and it gave me a huge range of music that I enjoyed. And I love it because my kids are kind of the same way. The only thing is they don't listen to a lot of country, but my kids have and it's one thing you hear about all the time on this podcast is my kids. I talk about my two kids a lot. I was thinking on the way over here, is my son is at a point now, and it's really a beautiful thing, man, is he'll find an artist or music or person, and he'll do a deep dive into everything he likes because he has to learn everything about it. He has to learn how did it start, exactly what was the lore, where they've been, where they've come through. He has to go through the entire catalog. And he got that from me. Mm-hmm. I had him listening to all this with everything, even with video games. My son's first video game system that I gave him, Super Nintendo system. That's what he learned, was the SNES. He learned video games there, so he has an appreciation of everything from back then, where things now came from, and it's an awesome feeling, man.
That's the old way of reading the record, the album covers, learning all the lyrics. Yeah. Reading the acknowledgments, seeing the names of the bands that they toured with. Special thanks to so and so in this town, and you look that band up and you find out that they're a famous band that you just hadn't heard of because we didn't have the internet. You couldn't just click links. It was oh cool, but yeah, big time. We are also, like he says, we're comic nerds, but we are also real, just kind of vintage themed. Yes. So if I can find a movie on VHS and watch it, I will choose that over DVD or Blu-ray. Strangely enough, I know there's a lot of video files on the Legion Podcast Network. You'll find us kind of be in the opposite direction on a throwback sort of way. And there's reasons behind it. A lot of times you can find some really kick-ass old movies that are no longer in print. And you get them for like 79 cents at the Goodwill store or whatever. But then also, I found that, especially with a lot of these old horror films that were shot on low budget, they were shot on cheap film or maybe even video to begin with, that whenever they did the digital transfers and they put them into HD and they cleaned them up, that it lost a lot of the magic that... I mean, that's the best way to describe it, is if you watch a magician do a coin trick, right, or any kind of sleight of hand... there is the deception. There's the trick itself that makes it seem as if the coin disappeared. And if you know how the trick's done, it's usually pretty simple, and it kind of ruins the magic for you. So whenever you and I remember the first one that really got me. Well, first it was Wizard of Oz. We're like, oh, hey, we're going to let the kids watch Wizard of Oz, and it was on like Netflix or something. And we played it, and it was frightening because it looked like a soundstage. You could see all the plastic, all the plants were plastic, all the colors were just way oversaturated and bright, and it just looked fake. It did not look like a magical fantasy world. It looked frightening and scary. And the next one, strangely enough, was Friday the 13th. It was like part 6 or something. It was got a DVD and threw it in there, and it looked fake. It looked like a guy in a plastic mask walking around, a set with plastic plants all around. It just all looked fake and rubbery. Right. And you put the VHS in there, and it's got that little bit of soft on the screen. It's got maybe a little tracking or whatever, but it goes back, and then it just looks like it looks like a guy killing people in a summer camp. Right. And so I started going to VHS, and now I watch VHS, and they don't have the stuff that's fixed, and it looks real. It looks good. So,
well, it's like we talked about with Joe Grisafi before, the use of practical effects back then, which we much prefer PI over here, is one of the things they depended on was that roughness of the taping to hide things like lines and cords and different things. And so when you look at a movie like Friday the 13th Part 3 on VHS compared to digital on a DVD, you can see the line, you can see the cord of the snake that jumps out of the rabbit cage. The VHS kind of hides that a little bit. It definitely makes a big difference in your movie enjoyment.
Totally. We're always hunting the stacks, creeping around a Goodwill. That's kind of a hobby of ours to kind of dig through, see what we can find. Make our own costumes for Halloween. Stuff like that. We are real big into the maker and crafter community here local. So much so that we actually started our own event back in 2017 called Scary Dad's Haunted Halloween Show. And we're big fans of Texas Frightmare Weekend, which is a big horror convention. It's a convention and film festival. It's a celebrity event, and they have a whole bunch of vendors just making really cool, unique stuff. And we were like, man, we want to be a part of that. So we started our own kind of small vendor event, made it very local centric. Did our first couple of years, it grew and grew, and then obviously 2020 kind of torpedoed us. But for 2021, we have partnered with the Houston Horror Film Festival, and in 2021, we've done one event. We've got 2 planned, and then a third one in September that we're going to do,
yes.
which is our show, the Haunted Halloween Show. But yeah, we're real big into the horror maker community here. Know lots of folks that make movies, that make music, that make
write authors.
A lot of authors that write horror stories. I've had my own work featured on the No Sleep podcast a few times, so I'm actually a horror writer as well as a podcaster. So our pedigrees are pretty decent, and we're always looking for something new, and we're excited to be part of the Legion podcast network. But one thing that we are doing differently, if you've listened to our last couple of shows, including our first show on Legion, is we are now inviting guests. We picked around the edges of having guests here and there for the last 169 episodes, 170 episodes, but now we're getting way into it. So we're actually reaching out and actively recruiting, pretty much anybody in that entire cadre of stuff that we just described. If you're a horror movie fan, if you are a horror maker, if you're a filmmaker or a podcaster or a movie reviewer or a writer or anything that involves any of this stuff, we welcome you to come on the show, be a guest host. You don't have to be local to us. You have to be local to you as long as you've got an internet connection and a Zoom account. Then we can hop on and we can talk horror for an hour and have a grand old time. So if you're interested in doing that, you see our links in the show notes, the scarydad.com. You can click in there. You can join us up on Facebook or Instagram or any of the other things. Hell, you can just send us an instant message and we'll schedule you on. And yeah, we'll do it like that. So,
and also, if you get a chance, check out our Facebook page, Scary Dad's Haunted Farm, and we have lots of extra content there. Actually, you can find out information on movie anniversaries, birthdays. We do videos on there. Our Zoom interviews that we do videos on, we do post to the Facebook page. It's a fun time. People are engaged. It's a good time. So definitely check out the Scary Dad's Haunted Farm on Facebook.
And I think we're going to go ahead and close down episode 171 because we've got to record episode 172. We usually do 2 shows at once. So, there's a good chance that if you want to be a guest on a show, you can be a guest on 2 shows depending on what your time looks like. So hit us up. Again, hit us up in the forum. We love to talk horror. We love it when people disagree with us. So if we talk about something and we're just like, oh, we hated it, and you're like, man, this is the best movie in the world. Dude, tell us. Hit us up. We won't take you to task. We'll friendly banter. We'll argue pretty nicely, and that's about what I got. So if you'd like to support the show too, you can go run over to the Houston Horror Film Festival pop-up market. There's a lot of good Scary Dad and HHF merch popping up almost every other day that we're getting set up. It's not a Zazzle shop either. We're actually supporting local vendors.
Yes.
So you support us. You support some really great folks as well. And with that, we'll see you next week. And until then, keep it scary.
Later.